Whispers in the Void. Prelude. My name is R. Garston. I'm 45 years old. And for the last 9, I've lived and worked alone in the asteroid belts. Just me and my ship, the Dust Widow. An old Class B hauler. Reinforced. Scarred. She holds together. That's more than I can say for most things in my life. I wasn't always out here. I lived on Earth once, had a home, a life, a wife. Her name was Tara. She walked into a room and it just quieted. Not because she needed it to. People just felt her, present, certain, real. We met when I was working orbital salvage near Luna. She was a systems engineer, brilliant, steady, and that laugh of hers could break through any kind of a bad day. Then the diagnosis. Stage 4 glioblastoma. 6 months, they said. She made it 5. The systems she built outlived her. And Earth felt crowded, loud, wrong. Everything we touched became haunted ground. I couldn't breathe there anymore, so I left. Sold off what little was left. Bought a rig headed for salvage. Rebuilt her from scrap. Renamed her Dust Widow. And I drifted. Solo mining was supposed to be temporary, just until the noise faded. But something in the silence stuck. The void has a kind of peace you don't find down in gravity. Out here, every day is survival. Every rock is one with sweat and patience. Cracked hulls, power surges, radiation warnings. It's just part of the job. There's no one coming. No rescue. If something breaks, I fix it. If I break, I don't. It's that simple. At first, I talked to the ship, recorded logs, kept my head straight. Then I started uploading. Didn't think much of it, but people watched. And they kept watching. Maybe they were looking for escape. Maybe they like seeing someone live on the edge without pretending it's pretty. Maybe they were lonely too. Now this channel, Void Miner, it's part journal, part how-to, part memorial. I'll show how to fix navigation in the belt, how to patch a hole in 0G, how to coax another 100 hours out of an ancient reactor. But more than that, it's a record of a man still trying to find something worth holding on to in the vacuum. I'm not chasing credits. I make enough to keep going. It's the quiet I came for. The space between things. The honesty that only exists when you're out of lies and out of time. No noise, no pretense. Just the silence and what echoes back. This isn't a show. No crew, no backup, no script, no BS. Just me, the belt, and the old ghosts I carry. Welcome to Void Miner. If you're looking for something real, you might have just found it. Out here, you listen to the rocks, or you go mad. Chapter 1. The Sound of Rockfall. Argarston adjusted the throttle on the Dust Widow's portside stabilizers and listened as the ancient actuators whined in protest. The ship yawed half a degree off-center before correcting itself, a sluggish, metallic groan echoing through the floor grates like a dying animal. "Yeah, I hear you," he muttered to no one in particular. "You and me both." Through the reinforced canopy of the cockpit, the asteroid field drifted past in slow, deliberate motion. Black against black. Chunks of carbonaceous rubble and frozen ammonia floated in loose clusters, remnants of some primordial collision millions of years ago. They tumbled endlessly, blind and indifferent, like everything else out here. Arg tapped the console screen, shifting the sensor array to short-range pulse. The Widow's LiDAR sweep painted a crude topography of nearby rocks in harsh green wireframes. Target: Asteroid 774, Delta Kilo. Composition: 42% nickel iron, trace platinum, group metals. 3% water ice. Yield: marginal. Not worth the fuel to move it. But this wasn't about yield. Not today. "All right, let's crack you open," he said. The mining arm extended with a shudder. Hydraulic lines pulsed weakly as the drill head spun up. Arg guided the ship closer, closing the gap with the slow, deliberate microbursts from the maneuvering thrusters. The first bite of the drill into the asteroid vibrated through the hull. Dust plumed, forming a slow, lazy cloud around the Widow, illuminated in harsh sodium light from the flood lamps. He watched the readouts. Core temperature rising, vibration dampeners barely holding, RPM fluctuation within tolerance. Good enough. The Shimbled rumbled like an old stomach. Ard settled back into the pilot's seat and stared at the camera feed displaying the drill's progress. The voice of the belt-deep, slow grinding filled the cabin as the rock gave way. The sound was comforting in a strange way, predictable, physical. A problem that had a solution, unlike most things in his life. After 3 hours and 400 kilograms of processed slag later, the Widow's hoppers were at maybe 30% capacity. Light, but better than nothing. Arg killed the drill and retracted the arm. The dust cloud lingered, wrapping the ship in a slow-moving fog of mineral grit. From the corners of his eye, the console's notification blinked. New comments, Void Miner channel. He ignored it, for now. Instead, he keyed open the main log recorder, flicked the battered camera housing toward him, and leaned forward. Void Miner 214, one-man ops. Location undisclosed. We're working low-yield nickel today. Rig's holding, but barely. If anyone's back home thinking of running Belt solo, don't. You'll live longer flipping burgers planet-side. He paused, rubbed his face. Anyway, that's the pull for today. Keep your seals tight. Out. He clicked off the recorder. The ship returned to silence except for the soft hum of the environmental scrubber cycling air through filters older than most first-year stationers. Arx exhaled and stretched, his spine popping audibly. A twinge shot down his left side, the same spot that always complained after long EVA shifts. Speaking of, he pulled up the ship's exterior diagnostics. One cracked starboard RCS nozzle, 2 hull micro fissures from the last debris field, 1 failing solar array hinge that refused to retract all the way. Added to the list. By the time he suited up and cycled the airlock for external inspection, the local star, a bloated orange dwarf, was sinking behind a distant rock wall, painting the field in deep rust colors and long, lazy shadows. He stepped onto the hull, magnetized boots clicking against the metal skin of the Widow. The view stretched in all directions, just dust, rock, and the endless breadth of dark space. Arg stood there for a long moment, helmet faceplate fogging slightly as he breathed. And that's when he heard it. Faint, barely there. A low ping, short burst, non-directional, then silence. He froze, turning his helmet's exterior mics to max gain. Nothing. Then again, this time clearer, a distress beacon. Old, weak, on a frequency no one used anymore. Arg's stomach sank. Could just be a dead drone. Could be an ancient probe on its last dying loop. Or worse, could be a person. Son of a bitch, he muttered. His breath fogged the glass again as he keyed open the signal capture on his wrist console. Coordinates triangulating. Drifting source. Deep belt. Further out than any sane miner would be. Exactly the kind of place where people like him end up when everything else is run out. Standing on the hall, staring into the black, Ard waited out. Ignore it, stay alive. Or answer it, and maybe die for nothing. He closed his eyes. In his mind, for just half a second, Tara's voice cut through the static, soft, familiar. You were always too stubborn to walk away. Arg swore under his breath. All right, Widow, let's go hunting. He turned back towards the airlock. Behind him, the asteroid field drifted on, silent and vast, as it always had. And as far as Arg knew, always would. Chapter 2. The Ghost Ping. The Widow's engines hadn't run at full thrust in weeks. Arg watched the reactor output climb past safe idle, holding his breath as the power relays flickered under load. The ship shuddered as the drive core coughed into life, like an old man waking up after too much drink. Come on, girl, he muttered, hands dancing over the controls. Don't make me suit up and kick you. The lights steadied. The drive stabilized at 53% power. Enough for a short-range burst. Good enough. He entered the new trajectory manually, bypassing the auto-nav's constant protests about collision risk and fuel margins. The Widow's onboard AI was old, more like a glorified calculator with attitude than a real companion. It existed to nag him, throw error codes, and keep the hull from turning into shrapnel. Arg trusted it about as far as he could throw it. The plotted intercept route wasn't pretty, long, looping, full of micro-course corrections to dodge drifting rocks and ice chunks, but it would get him there, eventually. Distance to source, 0.14 astronomical units, roughly 20 million kilometers. 2 hours at full burn if the reactor didn't melt down first. He kept the acceleration light, just enough to let the Widow coast most of the way on inertia. It would mean a slow approach, but that was safer than pushing the old ship any harder. Besides, out here, time was the one thing he wasn't short on. Arg sat back in the pilot's chair, cracked open a hydration pouch, and switched the main screen to long-range sensor mode. The beacon continued to pulse every 30 seconds, weak, degraded, and full of static, but consistent. Whoever or whatever was sending it, they'd been out there a while. He rubbed at the scruff on his chin, already coarse and overdue for a trim. No known traffic report showed ships in this sector of the last 90 days. No mining claims, no official survey paths, nothing. That made two possibilities: a forgotten survey drone or a ghost ship. And Arg hated ghost ships. Too many bad stories from other solo ops, abandoned freighters with dead crews still strapped to their chairs, old mining rigs running on broken auto loop, drifting until the reactors went cold. He found one once, years back. Didn't sleep right for weeks afterward. The Widow coasted on momentum as he neared the source coordinates. Arg switched to optical sensors and magnified the view. At first, nothing. Just rock and dark. Then, a glint. Small. Angular. Man-made. He zoomed further, and there it was, a lifeboat. Compact, battered, coated in ice crystals, and regolith dust from months of exposure. The outer hull was crumpled on one side where it had impacted a small asteroid, lodged in the rock like a beer can someone had stomped on and thrown into the void. No running lights, no visible thruster activity, just the fading ping of its emergency beeping. Perfect, Ark said under his breath. He ran a scan. Power levels inside the pod were almost zero. Life support, unreadable. The Widow didn't carry a dedicated tractor system, but he could maneuver close enough to grab it with the mag clamps. Not that he was happy about it. He considered leaving it. Just marking the coordinates, logging the find, letting station-side authorities handle it. Standard protocol. But station-side wasn't coming. Not for a pod this far out. Not anytime soon. It was him or nothing. All right, he said, sighing as he pulled on his EVA gloves. Let's see what you've got for me. The cold hit him hard the moment he stepped out onto the Widow's hull. Even with the suit heater on full, the deep space chill settled in fast, the kind of cold that gnawed at the bones. Arg moved with practice efficiency, magnetic boots locking with each step as he crossed towards the docking clamps. The lifeboat loomed larger now, barely 20 meters off the Widow's starboard side. He activated the mag grappler and fired. A burst of compressed gas, a hiss of hydraulics. The clamp caught the pod's twisted frame with a metallic crunch. The ship vibrated as the tether reeled it in and secured the pod against the airlock bulkhead. Arg double-checked the pressure seals. Then, with a final curse under his breath, he popped the external hatch. The smell hit him first, even through the filters in his helmet. Metal, stale air, burnt circuitry, and something else. Organic. He pulled his light from its mount and swept the interior. The pod was small, barely big enough for two bodies at most. The control console was fried, blackened from an internal power surge, and near the back, slumped in the corner, movement. Ark froze. For a second, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, but no. A figure, thin, wrapped in a faded thermal blanket. A cracked helmet lay beside them. They shifted, barely conscious, trying weakly to lift their head towards the sudden light. Ark's breath caught in his throat. Someone was still alive. Jesus, he muttered. His training kicked in before his brain could argue. He climbed inside the pod, suit servos whining as he crouched beside the figure. Female, early 20s maybe. Face pale, skin dry and cracked at the lips. Her breathing was shallow, ragged. Dehydration, oxygen starvation, low blood pressure, classic signs. She blinked, eyes unfocused. Ark tapped the side of his helmet, opening the external speaker. Hey, can you hear me? His voice came out rough, unused from being raised. Her lips moved, barely forming words. Cold. Yeah, Ark said, looping his arms under her shoulders, careful not to jar her too hard. Let's fix that. He hauled her out of the pod, moving slow but steady back towards the Widow's airlock. Behind him, the pod sat like a tombstone wedged against the hull. As the airlock cycle closed, the distress beacon outside finally fell silent. Inside the Widow's cramped med bay, little more than a converted storage locker with a bioscan rig bolted to the wall, Ark set her down on the fold-out gurney and started running emergency protocols. Oxygen infusion, IV fluids, mild stimulant pack. Her vitals were weak, but holding. Arg stripped out of his EVA suit, chest heaving. He stood there for a long moment, staring at her sleeping form. What the hell were you doing out here? He asked softly. Of course, there was no answer. Just the low hum of life support and the ancient voice of the ship's system chiming a quiet status update. Unknown biological entity stabilized. For the first time in a long while, Arg realized he wasn't alone. Not anymore. Chapter 3. The Wake Up. The widow's cabin smelled like sweat, hydraulic fluid, and old plastic insulation. Ark sat at the small fold-down table near the galley, nursing a bulb of weak coffee substitute, the kind that tasted like burnt rubber filtered through wet cardboard. It didn't matter. It was warm, and it kept his hands busy. The med scanner chimed again. Low priority alert. Patient showing increased neural activity. Arg sighed, set the coffee aside. Here we go. He stood, joints cracking from the hours he'd spent hunched over the console, and crossed the narrow hall to the med bay. She was awake. Sort of. Her eyes fluttered open, then squeezed shut again against the glare from the ceiling lights. Pale skin flushed at the cheeks, a sign the fluids were finally circulating right. Easy, Ark said, voice low but steady. You're safe. Shipboard's meds got you stabilized. Her breathing hitched. Dry, shallow. She coughed, a broken, rasping sound. Ark grabbed a hydration tube from the wall unit and held it near her mouth. Small sips, he said. She obeyed, too weak to argue, too thirsty to care. After a few moments, she managed to whisper, Where? Mining vessel, Ark said. Deep belt. Picked up your beacon. Her eyes opened again, wide now, confused. Beacon? Yeah. Ark pulled over the stool, sat beside her. Ark pulled over the stool, sat beside her. You were running low on everything. Oxygen, heat, power. If I hadn't have been out here, you let the sentence die. She could fill in the rest herself. She stared at the ceiling for a long moment, processing. Then her gaze shifted, tracking him properly for the first time. You miner? She asked, voice still thin. Arg Arston, he said. Captain, crew, mechanic, cook, and janitor, all in one package deal. Something almost like a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, brief, weak, but real. Raina, she said finally. Raina Soul. All right, Raina. Ark stood and started checking the readouts on the wall console. Vitals are climbing. That's good. But you're not out of the woods yet. You'll need rest, electrolytes, probably a full round of antibacterials. I've got enough supplies to keep you ticking for now. But after that, well, he trailed off. She didn't need to know how close he already was to running on fumes. Half an hour later, she slept again, deeper this time, breathing steady. Ark returned to the cockpit. The window's internal diagnostics flickered on the main screen. Hull stress levels were pushing redline. Fuel reserves low. Food packs, well, let's just say he'd been on ration cutbacks for weeks already. And now there were 2 mouths to feed. He pulled up the system nav map. The closest inhabited station was Ceres, a week away, minimum, at half thrust. If they push the reactor, 4 days. Maybe. Assuming no more breakdowns. Assuming. Ark rubbed his face and let out a tired laugh. This is what I get for playing hero, he said to no one. The console blinked again. Unscheduled long-range ping received. Source, Ceres traffic control. His heart skipped. He opened the channel. A heavily compressed burst came through. Packet data mostly, station logs, updated advisories, routine garbage. Then buried at the bottom, something that made him sit straighter. Notice to all belt traffic. Mining survey vessel CNS Ren. Last reported position, grid, Delta 34. Unconfirmed distress signal detected. Search suspended pending further resource allocation. Arg blinked at the coordinates. Delta 34. That was here, where he just pulled Raina's pod. He leaned back in the pilot's chair, staring at the bulkhead. So, the Wren was missing. Official search called off. No rescue coming. And Raina? Somehow still alive in a wrecked lifeboat, floating half dead at the edge of nowhere. Arg felt the weight of it settle in his chest. No good deed, he thought bitterly. No good deed. He reached for the camera mount on the console, flipped open the recorder. Void Miner 215, one-man ops. Scratch that. 2 souls on board now. Picked up a survivor from a derelict pod. Situation's complicated. He paused, looking at his reflection in the screen's glass. For the record, this is why I work alone. He killed the feed. Somewhere behind him, Reyna stirred in her sleep. Ark stared out at the asteroid field beyond the cockpit glass. The rocks tumbled on, silent and endless. And in his gut, Ark knew. The real trouble hadn't even started yet. Chapter 4. Fallout Trajectory. By the time Reyna could sit up on her own, the Widow's CO2 scrubbers were already screaming for a filter change. Arg heard the low, whining alarm echo through the ventilation ducts as he sat at the console, sifting through outdated station reports and trying to find any detail this area's broadcast hadn't included. The filter alert was just one more line on a long list of things going wrong. Oxygen reserves dropping, fuel cells running lean, food stores 4 days, maybe 5 if he stretched it. Life support holding, barely. Arg muted the alarm. One thing at a time, he muttered. From behind him came a dry voice. You always talk to yourself like that, or is this just a special day? Arg turned. Reyna stood in the hallway, one hand braced against the wall for balance. She wore one of his spare coveralls, 3 sizes too big, and her dark hair hung in tangled waves around her face. Her skin still had that hollow, sunken look that came from too long without proper oxygen, but there was color in her cheeks again. Sit down before you fall down, Ark said. She didn't argue, lowered herself carefully into the small bench near the galley. Her eyes scanned the cockpit, taking in the exposed wiring, the patched bulkheads, the warning lights that never seemed to fully turn off. Nice place, she said, voice still hoarse. Ark snorted. Luxury accommodations out here in the belt. 5 stars. Breathable air, questionable gravity, and gourmet protein slop twice a day. She cracked a dry smile. For a few seconds, they just sat there, neither speaking. The ship hummed and groaned around them like an old animal shifting in its sleep. Finally, Reyna broke the quiet. The Wren, she said softly. Ark glanced at her. That was your ship? She nodded, staring at the floor like she was seeing something far away. Survey crew, 6 of us, contracted to run mineral scans out past Grid Delta, routine job, until it wasn't. Her throat worked like she was trying to swallow something too big. Meteor strike? Ark guessed. She shook her head. Not a meteor. That made him pause. Reyna rubbed at her eyes. We picked up something on long-range scan. Energy signature we couldn't classify. Deep pulse, like a reactor spike, but wrong. Captain decided to alter course to investigate. Next thing we knew, her voice cracked. Hull breach. Total system failure. Everything went dark. Arg frowned. Attack? I don't know. I barely made it to the lifeboat. Next thing I remember, you tracking me out of it. She laughed once, a bitter, humorless sound. Guess I owe you for that. Arg folded his arms, thinking. Unregistered energy signature, sudden ship failure, missing crew. Too many unknowns. I pulled what's left of your pod's black box, he said. Haven't cracked it yet, but I will. Reyna gave a tired nod. Good luck. It was a piece of junk even before the hit. Arg pushed away from the console and stood. I'm going to patch the CO2 filters before we both pass out. After that, we'll see if I can squeeze a trajectory towards Ceres with what's left of the fuel cells. You think we'll make it? She asked. He shrugged. I've made worse runs on less. Her eyes lingered on him for a second longer than he liked. Why'd you pick me up? She asked, voice quieter now. You didn't have to. Arg froze in the doorway. For a long beat, he didn't answer. Then, without looking back, he said, "Didn't want another ghost on the logs." And with that, he disappeared into the service quarter, leaving Raina alone with the hum of failing machinery and the slow drift of the widow through cold, empty space. Chapter 5. Burn Calculations. Arg pulled himself halfway into the widow's cramped engineering crawl space, flashlight clamped between his teeth, hands elbow deep in a half-melted filtration manifold. The CO2 filter cartridges he'd pulled out was charred around the edges, black dust caking the intake mesh like soot from an old furnace. He tossed it aside with a grunt and reached for one of the last two spare cartridges. "One for today," he muttered, slamming the replacement into place. "One for whenever this whole thing inevitably gets worse." He keyed the airflow system back online. The ventilation fans coughed, stuttered, then settled into a low, tired whine. The stale air shifted. The widow breathed again, for now. By the time Arg climbed back to the cockpit, Raina was already there, sitting cross-legged on the floor with her back against the main console, the cracked remains of her lifeboat's data module spread out in front of her like a puzzle. "Thought you were supposed to be resting," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead with the sleeve of his coveralls. Raina didn't look up. Her fingers moved with quiet precision, coaxing a portable data slate to sync with what's left of the pod's storage core. "I'll rest when I'm dead." "Cute," Arg said. "You're making about 3 days from making that true if we don't burn for the station soon." He dropped into the pilot's chair and started pulling up the propulsion readouts. Fuel cell levels, 22% remaining. Enough for a single controlled burn and minor course corrections. No second chances. Arg calculated the burn vector by hand. The widow's nav computer was still running outdated software, and when it came to survival math, he didn't trust anything but his own fingers. Course plotted. Delta drift slingshot toward Ceres. 4-day burn window at low thrust with minimal correction delta. Projected arrival time, just barely before the oxygen reserves dipped into critical. Tight margins. Real tight. He sat back, let out a long breath. It'll be close. Too close. Behind him, Raina let out a low curse. Arg turned. "Problem?" She tapped her data slate, frustration tightening her jaw. "The black box is half fried. Most of the logs are scrambled or corrupted. But," she pulled up a short clip garbled video, pixelated and flickering. The image stabilized just long enough to show the Wren's bridge, dark, emergency lights flashing red, crew shouting, alarms blaring. Then, a flash. Not an explosion, not an electrical discharge. Something different. The whole screen went white for 3 seconds. When the video came back, it was static. "EMP?" Arg guessed. Raina shook her head. "Doesn't fit the profile. No build-up, no waveform signature on this data stream. Just this." She tapped another log. Energy spike detected. Origin unknown. Duration 2.6 seconds. Arg frowned. "Coordinates?" Raina fed the data through a rough triangulation. The source wasn't far. Less than 0.05 AU from their current position. Arg leaned forward, staring at the map. It wasn't along their plotted route to Ceres. They'd need to divert. Burn fuel they didn't have. Still. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. "Something out here knocked your ship dead and left you drifting," he said quietly. "And whatever it was, it's still sitting out there." Raina met his eyes. "Yeah," she said. "I know." For a long, silent moment, neither of them spoke. Then Arg stood and moved back to the console. He keyed the bird sequence into the main drive. "First priority's getting you to station," he said, voice flat. "We don't have fuel to play detective." Raina didn't argue, But as Arg's finger hovered over the ignition key, something inside him twisted. Part instinct, part experience, part that low, nagging voice that had kept him alive this long. He opened a secondary nav window, plotted a rough scan arc through the sector where the energy spike had originated, just wide enough to pick up any residual signatures as they passed. It wasn't much, but it was something. The Widow's main drive kicked in with a deep, angry rumble, then rattled every bolt and loose panel in the ship. Acceleration pushed Arg back into his chair. Raina braced herself against the console. The stars outside stretched into thin silver lines as ships picked up speed. Behind them, the field of dead rock and drifting debris shrank into darkness. Ahead, Ceres. And maybe answers, if they survived the trip. Chapter 6. Static on the Wire. 3 hours into the burn, the Widow's long-range sensors began throwing false positives. First it was small things. Phantom pings off non-existent debris fields. Thermal signatures that blinked into existence and vanished just as quickly. The nav array flagged 3 separate objects on collision course, then immediately cleared them, showing nothing but empty space. Arg watched each error code stroll across the console, one after another. He rebooted the sensor suite twice, ran a full diagnostic. No hardware faults, no software corruption, just bad data. Great, he muttered, rubbing his temple. Last thing I need is a nervous sensor array. From the co-pilot seat, Raina glanced up from her data slide. You too, she asked. Arg turned. What do you mean, me too? She hesitated, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I thought I heard something earlier. Voices, like radio chatter. Garbled, couldn't trace the source. He frowned, tapped through the comm logs. Nothing inbound. No external hails, no short-range transmissions. This tub barely gets station weather reports on a good day, he said. If there was traffic, I'd see it. Raina shrugged, but her expression stayed tight. A few minutes later, as Arg checked the reactor coolant flow, he caught it himself. A crackle of sound in his helmet, calm, brief, unintelligible, like someone whispering from the far end of a broken transmission line. Arg. He froze, stared at the comm channel display. No incoming call, no open frequency. He pulled the helmet off, checked the internal audio relays. Nothing wrong. When he looked up, Raina was watching him with wide, knowing eyes. You heard it too, she said quietly. Arg's mouth felt dry. It's probably bleed over from the sensor faults, he said, but the words felt thin as they left his mouth. Raina's gaze drifted towards the main viewport. Outside, the stars looked wrong. It took Arg a second to realize why. The ship's camera feeds, normally stable during burns, were flickering. Static bands rolled across the display like an old analog interface. Rebooting visual feeds, he said, fingers working the console. The screen went dark. For a breathless second, something moved in that blackness. A silhouette, human-shaped, standing motionless at the edge of the viewport. Arg blinked. When the screen refreshed, the snarl snapped back into place. The figure was gone. Arg sat there, staring at the glass, his heart hammering in his chest. Raina's voice broke the silence, low and uneasy. Arg, what sector are we in right now? He pulled up the nav map, checked the position overlay. They were passing just inside the perimeter of Delta 34's dead zone, the last known coordinates logged by the Wren before it vanished. Arg swallowed hard. We're moving through it now. Raina exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath since waking up. For the next 10 minutes, neither of them spoke. The ship pressed forward, engines burning slow and steady, cutting a thin line through the dark. Behind them, Winnow's internal speakers gave a soft, static-filled crackle. Just once. But it was enough. Chapter 7. Echo Drift. The first hard system failure hit just after the midpoint of the burn. ARG was mid-checklist, going over the reactor pressure readings for the third time, when the mains comm array dropped offline with a sharp burst of static that rattled through every speaker in the ship. Every display flickered, the lights dimmed. For a terrifying moment, the Widow's main reactor dipped below operational threshold. Damn it, ARG swore, slamming his palm against the console. Warning alerts cascaded across the interface. Comm array fault. Primary feed disconnected. Long-range transponder offline. Auxiliary nav link malfunction. Raina appeared in the doorway, wide-eyed and pale. What now? Comm mast's dead, ARG said, already yanking the tool locker open. Signal feed dropped out at the coupler, probably burned out wiring or a short at the base. Can you fix it from inside? ARG gave her a look. If I could, would I be strapping on an EVA harness right now? She didn't argue. Instead, she pulled a handheld power cell from the wall mount and tossed it to him. In case you need extra juice. Thanks. ARG hauled on his suit, cycling through the pressure checks automatically. Seals, O2 flow, backup tanks, emergency locator beacon. He lingered for a second on that last one, fingers hovering. Then he switched it on and clipped it to his belt. Because out here, no locator meant no body to find later. The airlock cycled with its usual sluggish grind. ARG stepped onto the hull, boots locking to the metal skin of the Widow. Space opened around him like a mouth. The stars were crisp and distant, cold points of light. The nearby asteroid field drifted like frozen shadows just beyond sensor range. Everything quiet. Too quiet. ARG moved quickly, making his way along the ship's spine towards the comm mast. His helmet HUD flickered twice on the way, an internal system glitch. He gave it a hard tap and kept moving. The mast itself looked worse than he'd hoped. A full thermal blowout at the base, blackened insulation, fried signal lines curling like burnt paper. He anchored himself with a tether and started cutting away the damaged couplings, replacing the burned sections with bypass lines. 20 minutes in, just as he locked the final connector in place, something moved at the edge of his vision. ARG froze. Turned. Nothing but open space behind him. He swept the helmet cam left, then right. Still nothing. But his suit comm hissed slowly, an open channel crackling with dead air. ARG. The voice drifted through the static. Familiar. Impossible. ARG's throat tightened. He spun towards the port side view, scanning the starfield. That's when he saw it. A figure. Human shape. Drifting 20 meters off the Widow's hull. No suit, no tether, no visor. Just a shape. Watching him. Terra? The name slipped out before he could stop it. He blinked. The figure was gone. Just empty space again. His heart pounded so hard it shook his chest. For a second, he stood there, floating, every instinct screaming at him to get back inside the ship. But the work wasn't done. Fingers shaking, ARG forced himself to finish the patch job. He keyed the final diagnostic. The comm array flickered back to life. Strength weak but stable. He pulled himself back toward the airlock, moving faster now. By the time he stepped inside, shedding his helmet, Raina was waiting just beyond the hatch. Her expression went flat the second she saw his face. You saw something, she said. ARG didn't answer. Who? She pressed. He sank down onto the nearest bench, running both hands over his face. I don't know, he lied. But the name still echoed in his head. Terra. Somewhere behind them, the Widow's external sensors pinged low-level proximity warnings. Nothing visible, nothing on scope. Just Space. Arg stared at the nearest bulkhead, and for the first time in years, he wasn't sure if what he'd seen was real. Chapter 8. Black Box Ghosts. The decrypted data finally cracked itself open at 0300 ship time. Arg had been running brute force algorithms for the better part of 6 hours, cycling through the encryption models older than most station techs even remembered. Whatever the Wren's engineers had been protecting, they hadn't wanted anyone poking around in it, not even their own crew. When the Widow's console finally pinged, Arg almost didn't believe it. Data reconstruction, 68% integrity. Raina sat up from where she'd been half dozing near the comms panel. Her eyes locked onto the screen instantly. "You got it?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Most of it," Arg said. "Enough." He patched the ship's data stream through the ship's main display. The video feed flickered once, then steadied. The Wren's bridge appeared on the screen. Low light. Emergency status. Static crackling at the edges of the video. The timestamp in the corner showed it had been recorded less than 12 hours before the Wren's final transmission. A man filled the center of the frame, late 40s, close-cropped hair, survey uniform still crisp despite the chaos around him. Captain Elias Morrow, according to the ID overlay. His face was pale with stress, voice shaking, but clear. "This is Captain Morrow of the CNS Wren," he began. "If you're receiving this, do not approach our position. Repeat, do not approach Grid Delta 34. Unknown anomaly encountered. Every signature inconsistent with any known belt phenomenon." In the background, the sound of alarms and frantic voices bled into the recording. "We engaged standard avoidance protocol at 0800 hours. Anomaly responded with what I can only describe as a directional field pulse. Full system cascade failures followed within minutes." The captain's eyes flicked towards something off screen. There was shouting, sparks, then another female voice, desperate. "It's inside the ship!" The audio warped, something like feedback, but lower, deeper, like the sound of metal shearing under impossible stress, but slowed down, distorted. Morrow's face twisted, and for a brief second, something blurred past the camera lens, too fast to see. The image glitched again. "If this gets out, tell Celestia Control the belt isn't empty anymore," Morrow said, leaning closer to the console. Then whiteout flash. The recording ended. Total runtime, 3 minutes, 12 seconds. The Widow's cabin stayed silent for a long time. Raina sat frozen, staring at the dark screen. Her hands trembled slightly. Arn leaned back into the chair, rubbing at the base of his neck. "Inside the ship," he repeated quietly. Raina swallowed. "It wasn't a malfunction." "No," Arg said. "It wasn't." He pulled up the current nav projection. Ceres was still 3 days away. Too far to call for help. Too far to run without burning every ounce of fuel they had. And with the Widow's systems already buckling, Arg exhaled slowly. "Whoever did this, it's still out there," Raina said. Arg didn't answer. Instead, he keyed up the Widow's sensor suite and expanded the scan radius wider than he ever risked before, eating precious power reserves. The array pulsed once, twice. Then the proximity alarms began to scream. Raina jumped to her feet. "What is it?" Arg stared at the screen. Something massive. Not a ship. Not a rock. Not anything the belt charts have ever listed. Just a field of interference. A gravity well that shouldn't exist at these coordinates. Moving. Closing the distance. Fast. "Strap in," Arg said, reaching for the flight controls. Raina grabbed the nearest harness as the Widow's deck started to tremble under their feet. "Where the hell are we going?" she shouted. Arg's hands flew over the controls, rerouting power to engines, bypassing safety protocols. Anywhere but here. Behind them, the long-range sensors distorted completely. For just a half second before the screen cut to black, something appeared in the static. A shape. Vast. Angular. Watching. And then, silence. The end of part 1.